With a question that I broached here at the table.
Okay.
So we saw Paladin switching, and Black got a new Paladin, a new leader. And I sort of had like a board going that you're trying to figure out how the Lions choose their Paladins. Because there seemed to be, someone brought up a sort of a trait similarity between all of them, but for me, the three people who had piloted Black seemed in some ways very different. So could you guys sort of talk about, is there sort of an origin, or is there like a plan? Is there an outline for how you see the Lions choosing their corresponding Paladins, or is it just sort of like you guys go with the original series in your gut?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I
think we obviously do try to make the story make sense. We're not just like, and we're gonna do this because we want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think we don't try to go for any like checklist of what like the Lions look for, like a hard and fast. If it doesn't fit this, like then the guy doesn't fit in. I think, the Black Lions saw something in the original Zarkon, who was a good person at the time, and he was a good strategic leader. And Voltron is a weapon, so it's made for battle, and Zarkon is good in battle. Alpha was probably a better diplomatic leader, able to make connections and be more of a good president in that sort of way. But in battle, he's not as tested. So he was Zarkon's right hand. I think with Shiro, he was right off the bat just the best leader, and so they knew he was tested in battle, all that stuff. Keith is really great at battle, but he wasn't great at leading. And I think
him and Shiro had the closest relationship, so there was that kinship there.
Yeah, he learned from Shiro, and I think the Black Lion probably got from Shiro what Shiro saw in Keith, and kind of honed in on that a little bit. And now, as I touched on it a little bit in the panel with the Lions kind of nurture, and they don't have to start with someone who's maxed out at 100%. They just have to see something in a person. And I think the Black Lion sees what Keith can be, even if he may not be there 100% yet.
I'll say in nature too, it's interesting when you watch nature documentaries, when a lioness is done with its cub, you're raised, you're reared, it's just she just ignores it. She's like, it's time to go now. You got to go hunt on your own. And the same thing, we can't really explain sometimes why a lioness will, take in another animal and nurture it. There's just that instinct in there. So I mean, I think some of this stuff isn't really explainable. There's a nurture there. At the same time, there's also just the fact that the original show had a lineup that we thought it would be kind of fun to try to replicate for a little while. So there's a duality of, I think, reasoning behind all of it.
Do you think we're going to be seeing any of Paige and Lance talking about family issues together? How do you feel the separation?
I don't know if they'll be talking about it on screen so much. But there's definitely I think hints to Paige is pursuing her, looking for her family. But I think the problem at hand is this coalition building, and I think it was something that we tried to tackle
early on.
Early on with Hunk and Lance being a little homesick, and kind of put it to bed a bit, where they come to that realization of you know what, this is really important right now. That we hope is still going to be there when we get back, just so that we could continue on with our story. Pidge's story obviously being more out in space with the rest of our guys, so she needs to continue on that story and look for her family.
It's interesting because Pidge is outwardly looking for her family, and Hunk and Lance would have to be looking back. But what I really liked about the opening of season 3 was that everybody sort of just embraced their roles, and they had evolved to those paladins that we knew they could become. They're working with the Blade of Marmora. There's this sort of synergy happening. So I think they're realizing that there's a greater good sort of to be had. But that's all stuff that there's a lot of Voltron left. A lot of Voltron left.
So the Japanese dub version of Voltron hit late June, and so this is now a crazy cultural exchange between Beast to a Lion, originally Japanese, now North American, and it's going back to Japan, and people are going nuts over it. That's awesome.
It's insane.
Do you guys have anything to say about the Japanese film?
Yeah.
Thank you. Like I mean, I think just because we're so influenced by anime, and obviously this show wouldn't exist without the original, and we have so much respect for the people who made that show. And we went back and we watched the whole thing, and when it came over here as Voltron, the story had been pretty drastically changed, and so we went back and we looked at the original story, and there was some really interesting stuff there, and like they were really trying to do something, I think, that was ahead of its time.
It was deep. Yeah,
and it was just a really great show, and so we just want to say thanks to the original creators, and just thank you to the fans for being accepting of this silly show that came to America, got kind of redubbed, rehacked, and then now we're remaking it and sending it back, and just it's so cool that they're like accepting of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind blowing, and I think the other thing is to see some, like on Twitter, there are people that are working in the industry that will like do fan art of Voltron. Like the first time I saw that, like I got weepy. It's crazy. That the entire culture of anime, it's like been such an influence on us. It was even before we realized we were actively seeking it out. It was they were producing the shows that we were watching that were being dubbed and brought over here. So even before we knew it was a thing that was influencing us, it was influencing us. And there's one dude in particular who's not necessarily like a anime artist, but he's designed. His name's Akima, and he worked for Capcom. And he had a blurb where he was like, "Hey, the show's actually all right." And he's like, "And I don't hate the robot." And my mind, like, I could not believe what I was reading. I mean, he like one of the biggest influences on my artistic anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome. It's incredible.
So we learned in the last season that Zarkon was originally good. Obviously, we kind of always had hints of that, and then Hagar was originally good, and then was obviously twisted and turned into something a lot darker. And we also learned that Lotor was the product of Hagar and Zarkon.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings up the idea of indoctrination, and that this child was raised in this, with the Gaura, and has been always raised to believe that this is the way things are. Is there any chance that like Lotor is going to question that way of thinking, or is he really believes in this and is willing to wants to revolutionize the Gaura way into his own kind of dictatorship and control?
I think Lotor's a free thinker.
Yeah.
So I think he's got his own spin on things. I think it's very safe to assume.
Yeah. I think we've already kind of shown that he has his own way of looking at things, and that he might have like certain biases towards the Galar Empire, it being his home, but he's definitely got a completely different approach from Zarkon, and I think he's willing to kind of look beyond what Zarkon was looking at and just try things.
I mean, I've made the comparison before, but the Roman Empire was a pretty brutal empire, but there were heroes within that framework, and people that stood for what they considered just causes. So if you were to look at Lotor in that light, he might have some aspects of good in him. He might have some aspects that are manipulative, but you can see them through different lenses. So yeah, he's a free thinker.
So obviously, like Princess Allura, obviously.
Yes.
She looks very different now than she did in the original. I just kind of wanted to know the thought process behind making her how she was.
I think when we looked at the original lineup of the series, we knew we wanted to bring some diversity to it.
Okay.
And like they had some different skin colors in the original, but when we looked specifically at Allura, she just kind of looked like another Earthling. And we knew we wanted to make her more different from the rest of them, and so we gave her some smaller things like the ears and like the little markings, and then we just kind of thought about it more, and we're like, what, we can go even farther with this, and we can give her just a really unique color scheme all around, and just to make her more unique and more different from, like, I guess to kind of show the difference between our 5 paladins from Earth and then Allura from Altea.
Yeah, and I think it's also a sign of the times that, a show that was either ambiguous about what the characters were, or you just assumed in Beast King Go Line that they were all, Asian, Japanese, and then as soon as it was brought to the States, they were all just white dudes. you know, we just didn't want to. Things have evolved. So yeah, I think that's what we wanted to bring to it.
So there was a scene in the 6th episode of season 3 where Keith has now become sort of the leader, and Shiro is back. And then there's this scene where Allura and Shiro both at the same time sort of decide we need to go after this cargo ship and not go after Lotor and his generals. And I sort of wanted to know, like, clearly I feel like Lance is coming up, Allura has a lot of leadership abilities. How is this going to shape up? Because you mentioned on the panel that 3 of the paladins sort of help usher Pidge along the way, but there's 4. There should be 4. So I'm assuming that maybe we don't have anybody piloting the Black Lion at this point, do we? Or did I just misread that?
I think you might have misread that.
Okay, so there is somebody piloting. I just sort of wanted to hear your thoughts on like how each of the paladins is going to shape up in terms of being a leader.
I think with the scene with the cargo ship and stuff, I think we were just trying to sell the idea that it's a struggle to be a leader. It's a struggle to come to a decision. It's a struggle to make the right decision. And sometimes, whether it's the right or the wrong one, you have to stand by your decision and go with it and make the best of that situation.
And I think it's even a struggle for Shiro to take that step back.
Yeah.
And like, he's so used to being that leader that he's giving that orders, but he kind of needed to let Keith go.
Decision. Yeah.
And there's kind of like backseat leadershiping.
He was being a dad, you know. So yeah, I think he's coming to terms with. It's got to be different too. He's sort of the eye in the sky at this point, so he's seeing a very different battlefield than maybe Keith's seeing while he's in it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have Allura, who's used to also being a leader when she was in the castle, and now she's in the Lion, and she needs to kind of be more of a cohesive member of this immediate team that's working Voltron versus just kind of giving her commands, and so she's kind of adjusting to that. So yeah, they were a little bit of a mess, but I think it was kind of intentional to show just like their growing pains.
Right.